Keith Fenwick is an exceptionally popular landscape artist and author who believes that anyone can be taught to paint. His thorough understanding of students' needs and his refreshingly different and relaxed approach guarantee that you'll create beautiful landscape paintings of your own.
Hi, I'm Keith Fenwick. This is the first of a series of videos produced to complement my book Seasonal Landscapes. The video is going to show you how to get started and to encourage you to start painting from day one. Let's have a look at the materials we're going to use. I use 4 brushes to paint with. This is a sky and texture brush. This is a Hague brush that I use for doing my skies and my grass and so on. I have a large size 16 pointed brush that I use to do control. And I have a 3/4 flat, which is very useful when I'm doing buildings and so on. And I have the equivalent of a rigger brush, which I use for fine detail. With these 4 brushes, I can paint most landscapes that I encounter. For landscape painting, the colours I prefer are Payne's Grey, alizarin crimson, cerulean blue. With these I paint my skies. My earth colours are raw sienna, burnt sienna and burnt umber. And I use a couple of mixes. I use cadmium yellow and I use hooker's green. The secret of watercolour painting is knowing how wet the paint on your brush has to be in relation to the wetness of your underpainting. That's very important. Let's look at some basic techniques. Let's produce what we call a wetting wet sky and see if we can avoid hard edges. So I've wet it very simply like that with a large brush. And now I'm going to drop some clouds in. I'm going to use some Payne's Grey, a little bit of cerulean blue, and we'll just make the brush dance across the paper and we'll put in a few clouds like that. A little bit darker paint. And there's just get that blob of paint out, a very simple sky there. Now we need to dry that before we put in the mountains. We've let the sky completely dry. I'm going to paint in some impressions of mountains very quickly. Always remember with your brush strokes when you're painting mountains to follow the structure of the mountain. That's a little bit red, so I'm going to add a bit more Payne's Grey to it. Very simply, just to highlight the sky. Just pick out a couple of peaks of the mountains, start shaping them. Dip the brush in water, soften the edge like that. There's a couple of mountains. What I normally do is just take a little bit out like that, look at a bit of character using the tissue. And then we need to dry that again. You'll notice that I've fastened some masking tape across the painting. Taking it off now enables it to keep the waterline perfectly level. All we're doing now is apply some rough texture that I've previously demonstrated to put in our water. It's as simple as that. Using a very light touch, we'll just add a bit more depth into the water. And there we are, simple, what I call one of my simple doodles. So there we have it, a very simple doodle that anyone can paint from day one. We've achieved soft texture in the distance and we've painted rough texture in the foreground. You probably haven't realised that I've coated my palette with cling film because it's so easy to clean the paint. There you are, back to a nice clean palette now. I always use a rough textured paper when I'm painting because you can create wonderful effects. I'm going to show you how. I've painted in a simple foreground and I'm going to paint in a tree structure for you. I'm using the round pointed brush and I'm just going across the peaks of the paper to create a tree shape. I want darker green now with some raw sienna to soften it, and I'm going to gradually build up the structure of a tree, gradually going higher and shaping the tree. Need some darker green now with a bit of burnt umber. I'm assuming the light's coming from the right, and there we are, the structure of a tree. I'm just starting to shape it now, look, but by using it textured paper, rough textured paper, I can get an interesting tree effect. I'm just going to put in a bit of a trunk, and I'm going to highlight a few branches coming through the tree like that, which I would normally use a rigger brush for, but I just need a little bit more depth in that tree, a bit of depth. Trees are dark on the inside, light on the outside, and there's a simple tree. I need to put a little bit of shadow underneath there like that, and I'm going to just put a few tufts, indicate a few tufts of grass around the bottom of the trunk, because the tree wasn't planted there last night and there's always something growing around. I'm going to paint some bushes for you now, and you'll see the benefit of a good rough textured paper. Don't make all your bushes the same height, and try to make them different colours. I'm adding a bit of burnt sienna now to a bit of Payne's grey. Trees are dark on the inside and light on the outside. Got to add depth in your foliage. That's what I'm looking for. Add a bit of raw sienna now, just to vary the colours. Now all I need now is some nice dark colours. I'm using some Hooker's green with some burnt sienna. That's what I'm looking for, look. I'm only going halfway up the bushes this time. And then we'll put some shadow underneath. Very important, this shadow. There we are. I'm going to use a knife now to scratch in some structure. If you do this too early, it fills in and it goes black and it's not very attractive. If you catch it just right, you get a nice light tree trunk structure. Yeah, that's working nicely now, look. It's very effective. I'll just turn this into a little painting now by putting in a little fence. Very simply painted. Just darken that a little bit. And there we are. Very simple doodle for you to enjoy and practice.